I'm Kelly, a 43-year-old mother of two, married to Larry, a kind man who's been my support for almost 22 years. Life's been full of ups and downs, but I've always believed that it's the people with you that make it bearable. That was until my brother Scott decided to take charge. Scott is 10 years younger than me, a whirlwind of bad decisions and wrong priorities. He's the kind of person who thinks the world owes him. Mom always said he'd grow out of it, but at 31 he's still the family's problem. It was a Sunday, the kind that calls for a family gathering at Mom's house. Her house was our safe place, full of childhood memories. As usual, Larry, the kids, and I were there, enjoying Mom's famous roast and her stories from the past. That's when Scott burst in like an unexpected storm. The door slammed against the wall, and he strutted in with a smug smile on his face. He wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm was a young woman, barely out of her teens, with a clearly pregnant belly and a dress more suited for a nightclub than a family lunch. Larry choked on his tea. Lauren, my 13-year-old, asked if she was going to be an aunt. Eric, the 10-year-old, was more interested in why Aunt Olivia's dress was so shiny. Family, meet Olivia, my fiancée, Scott announced, as if he was showing off a prize. Mom's fork dropped. Fiancé, Scott, we talked about this, she said. Olivia flipped her hair and gave us a look that could spoil milk. Yeah, we're getting married, and this little guy, she patted her belly, is Scott Jr. The room was so quiet you could hear the clock ticking. Larry cleared his throat. Congratulations, Scott. That's big news, Scott smirked. We're staying here for a while, till we get our own place. Mom tried to smile, but I saw the worry in her eyes. It was like watching someone set up camp at the edge of a cliff. That night, after the kids were in bed, Larry and I talked. Kelly, your brother isn't just irresponsible, he's taking advantage of your mom. I knew he was right. Scott was a tornado, and we were all in his path. The only question was how much damage he would do before he moved on. The next few days were a blur of Scott and Olivia making themselves at home. Olivia turned the living room into her personal lounge, always putting her feet up on Mom's antique coffee table. Scott spent his days on his phone, laughing at things no one else found funny. Mom was running around, trying to keep up, making meals, cleaning up after them, and never getting a thank you. It was like watching someone slowly deflate. One evening, I found Mom alone in the kitchen, looking older than her years. Mom, you can't let them walk all over you, I said. She sighed, Kelly, he's my son, and that's my grandbaby. I can't turn them away. I wanted to scream, to tell her she was being used, but I bit my tongue. Family is complicated, and sometimes love means turning a blind eye, even when you know you shouldn't. That's how our new normal began. Scott and Olivia, the ungrateful guests, and the rest of us trying to keep the peace in a house that suddenly felt too small. Little did I know, this was just the calm before the storm. Living with Scott and Olivia turned our lives upside down. Every morning started with Olivia's loud complaints about her backache or cravings. She'd stroll into the kitchen in her pajamas, demanding breakfast like she owned the place. Kelly, make me some of those pancakes, will you? The baby's craving them, she'd say, without even a please. I'd grit my teeth, trying to keep my cool. Sure, Olivia, let me just get Lauren and Eric ready for school first. Scott was no help either. He'd be lounging on the couch, his feet up on the coffee table, glued to his laptop or gaming. Hey, when's breakfast? He'd yell, not even bothering to look up. Mom tried to play peacemaker. Kelly, they're just young. Remember how we were? I wasn't having it. Mom, we never acted like entitled brats, but she just waved me off, scurrying to wait on them hand and foot. Things got worse as Olivia's due date approached. She'd leave a trail of mess wherever she went, dishes piled up, laundry forgotten, and there she'd be, on the phone gossiping for hours. One day, I snapped. I found her in the living room, her feet once again on the coffee table, talking loudly to a friend. And then I told Scott, we need a new car, Something safe for the baby, you know? I marched in. Olivia, this isn't a hotel. You can't expect everyone to clean up after you. She rolled her eyes. Chill, Kelly, I'm pregnant, remember? Scott finally spoke up. Kelly, lay off her. Can't you see she's carrying my kid? I shot back. Being pregnant doesn't give you a free pass to be a slob, Scott. Mom came in, wringing her hands. Please, let's not fight. It's not good for the baby. I looked at Mom, her face drawn and tired. This isn't right, Mom. You're wearing yourself out for them. Mom wouldn't listen. Their family, Kelly. What can we do? The days dragged on. Scott and Olivia would disappear for hours, leaving Mom to clean up their mess. They'd return with shopping bags, laughing about their day out. One evening, I heard them planning a lavish wedding. We need the best, babe. It's our day, Scott said, his arm around Olivia. Olivia giggled. Of course, and your mom can help with the expenses, right? I couldn't believe my ears. I confronted them. You're planning a wedding you can't afford and expecting Mom to pay for it. Scott shrugged. Why not? She's got the money. I was livid. You can't keep using Mom like your personal ATM, Scott. My words fell on deaf ears. They just laughed and continued their planning, leaving me fuming. Life in Mom's house had gone from bad to unbearable. Olivia had given birth to a baby boy, Jerry. You'd think that would slow them down, but no, it only gave them more excuses. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Mom washing a mountain of dishes. Olivia was sprawled on the sofa, cooing at Jerry, while Scott played some game on his phone. Morning, Mom. Why are you doing all these dishes? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Mom just sighed. Olivia needs to rest, and Scott's busy. I glanced at Olivia. Busy doing what? Olivia, you can't just leave everything to Mom. Olivia shot me a look. I just had a baby, Kelly. I'm not supposed to stress myself. Scott didn't even look up. Yeah, Kelly, back off. You don't know how hard it is. I couldn't believe it. Hard? You call sitting on your butt all day hard? Mom tried to calm things down. It's okay, Kelly. I don't mind. But I was past caring. No, it's not okay. You're not their servant. It was like talking to a wall. Scott and Olivia just didn't care. They'd leave the house for hours, leaving Mom to take care of Jerry. They'd come back with bags of clothes and gadgets, bragging about their great deals. One day, I found a receipt on the table for a designer dress for Olivia. It cost more than what most people make in a week. I confronted them. Scott, where did you get the money for this? And why is Mom paying for your lifestyle? Scott shrugged, not bothered. She's our mom, Kelly. She wants to help. I was furious. Help? You're bleeding her dry. Olivia smirked and chimed in. If she's willing, why not? Besides, what's it to you? I couldn't take it anymore. I had to talk to Mom alone. Mom, you can't keep giving them money. They're using you. Mom just shook her head. I can't abandon them, Kelly, especially not Jerry. I tried to reason with her, but they're not even trying to be responsible. Scott's not looking for a job, and Olivia's just spending your money like water. Mom looked away, her voice barely a whisper. I know, Kelly, but they're my children. I have to help them. I felt helpless, watching my family fall apart. Scott and Olivia were like leeches, draining everything and giving nothing back. And Mom, bless her heart, was too kind to see it. I didn't know how much more I could take. The breaking point was near, and I feared what would happen when we finally reached it. Things took a turn for the worse when Mom suddenly fell ill. It happened so fast. One day she was her usual self, and the next she was bedridden, looking frail and weak. I was at her bedside, holding her hand. Mom, you're going to get through this, I whispered, trying to sound more hopeful than I felt. She gave me a tired smile. I'm just worn out, Kelly. I've lived a good life. Scott and Olivia were nowhere to be seen, probably out spending more of Mom's money. I couldn't hide my anger anymore. Where are they, Mom? Why aren't they here helping? Mom's eyes were sad. They have their own lives, Kelly. Don't be too hard on them. But I couldn't let it go. Their own lives? They're living off you, Mom, and now when you need them the most, they're absent. Mom just sighed. It broke my heart to see her like this, defeated and alone. Then the inevitable happened. Mom passed away quietly one night, with me by her side. Scott and Olivia were out, probably having the time of their lives, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding at home. The funeral was a blur. I remember seeing Scott and Olivia arrive at the funeral, looking like they were going to a party instead of mourning a loss. Olivia's dress was too short and flashy even for a funeral. People were whispering, and Larry squeezed my hand, trying to comfort me. After the service, Scott pulled me aside. "Kelly, we need to talk about Mom's will." I was still in shock from losing Mom. "Now? Can't this wait, Scott?" He was insistent. "No, it can't. I know she left the house to me. We need to sort this out." I couldn't believe his audacity. "Scott, Mom just died. Can't you show a little respect?" But Scott was relentless. "This is important, Kelly. I'm her son. I deserve it." The day after the funeral, I went to Mom's house to start sorting through her things. When I got there, Olivia answered the door with a smug look. "What do you want, Kelly?" she sneered. I was taken aback. "I came to collect some of Mom's things." Olivia laughed, a cold, harsh sound. "Oh, you didn't hear? This is our house now. Scott got everything." Scott appeared behind her, grinning. "Yeah, Kelly, Mom changed her will. The house, the money, it's all mine." I felt a surge of anger and disbelief. "You're lying. Mom would never do that." Scott shrugged. "Believe what you want, but the will is clear. This is my house now." I stood there on the doorstep of the house I grew up in, feeling like a stranger. The realization hit me hard. Not only had I lost my mother, but now I was losing my childhood home to my greedy brother and his manipulative wife. As I walked away, I knew this wasn't the end. I had to fight back for Mom, for my family, and for what was right. But little did I know, the battle ahead would be tougher than anything I'd faced before. I was a bundle of nerves as I walked into the notary's office. The whole situation felt like a bad dream. Losing Mom was hard enough, but fighting with Scott over her will was something I never imagined. The notary, Mr. Richard, was an old family friend. He looked up as I entered, his face somber. "Kelly, I'm sorry for your loss. Let's get straight to the matter at hand." I nodded, trying to steady my voice. "Mr. Richard, Scott says Mom left everything to him. That can't be true." Mr. Richard shuffled some papers. "Well, let's see what the will says." Scott and Olivia walked in just then, all smugness and arrogance. Olivia gave me a triumphant smirk. "Ready to lose, Kelly?" I ignored her and focused on Mr. Richard. He cleared his throat and began reading the will. My heart was pounding in my chest. "And to my son Scott I leave." I braced myself for the worst. The sum of $4,000. Scott's face fell. "What? That's it?" Mr. Richard continued, "And to my daughter Kelly, I leave the family home and the remainder of my estate." I couldn't believe it. Relief and disbelief washed over me. Olivia was furious. "That's impossible. She promised us the house." Mr. Richard looked at them sternly. "There's more. It appears your mother made this last will a month ago, after expressing concerns about undue pressure from certain family members." Scott was red with anger. She wanted me to have the house." I couldn't help but feel a sense of justice. "Mom knew what you were doing, Scott. She knew you were using her." Scott turned to me, his eyes blazing. "You did this. You turned her against me." Olivia chimed in, her voice shrill. "We'll contest this. We'll get a lawyer." Mr. Richard raised an eyebrow. "You're free to do so, but be aware if it's found that there was any coercion involved in the previous will, there could be legal consequences." Scott and Olivia looked at each other, their confidence wavering. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. "Mom saw through your greed. She made sure her last wishes were respected." Scott stormed out, cursing under his breath, with Olivia trailing behind him. I stayed back, thanking Mr. Richard. As I left the office, I felt a mix of emotions. Sadness for losing Mom, relief that her last wishes were honored, and a lingering anger at Scott and Olivia's audacity. It was a regular afternoon when Scott stormed into the house, his face red with anger and disbelief. $200,000 for you, and just a measly $4,000 for me? How is that fair, Kelly? I was sorting through some of Mom's papers, but his outburst made me pause. Scott, that's what Mom decided. You know she always had her reasons. He slammed his hand on the table, making me jump. Reasons? What reasons could she possibly have to screw me over like this? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. Maybe because you and Olivia have been bleeding her dry for years. Scott's face contorted with rage. That's not fair. We deserve that money. That's when I found it, tucked away in a drawer, a letter from Mom. Her handwriting was unmistakable. I pulled it out and started reading. Scott's eyes were fixed on me, a mix of curiosity and fear. What's that? It's from Mom. I said, my voice steady. She explains everything here. The letter laid it out clearly. Mom had originally set aside $200,000 each for Scott and me, but as Scott and Olivia kept asking for money, she started deducting from his share. I looked up at Scott, his face shocked. By the time she wrote her last will, you'd already taken $96,000, Scott. There was only $4,000 left. Scott staggered back as if he'd been hit. No, that can't be true. I felt a surge of anger. It's all here, Scott. Every cent you and Olivia took came out of your inheritance. He looked lost, his eyes darting around the room. But I didn't know. That's the problem, Scott. You never knew or cared to know. I snapped, my patience wearing thin. He slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. What have I done, Kelly? I put the letter down, feeling a mix of pity and frustration. You only got yourself to blame, Scott. You chose this path. Scott left the house that day a broken man. I watched him go, feeling a sense of justice, but also a deep sadness. Our family was torn apart not just by grief, but by greed and ignorance. The house, once a battleground of family feuds, was now eerily quiet. Scott and Olivia had left, cutting off all contact with me. It was both a relief and a curse, leaving me to deal with the aftermath of their chaos. As I sat in the living room, staring at the walls that had witnessed so much, my friend Nancy called. Kelly, have you heard about Scott? I braced myself. No, what now? She hesitated. He's been spotted around town, looking for jobs. And Olivia? She's been seen with different men, flaunting around like she's single. My heart sank. And Jerry, their son. No sign of him, Kelly. It's like they've forgotten they have a child. I slammed my fist on the table, fury boiling inside me. They're irresponsible and selfish. They don't deserve a child. Nancy tried to calm me. Kelly, maybe there's something you can do. Her words sparked an idea. You're right. I'll fight for Jerry. He shouldn't suffer because of them. The next day, I met with a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Miss Michelle. I explained everything, my voice trembling with determination. So, you want to pursue custody of your nephew? Miss Michelle asked, her eyes sharp. I nodded firmly. Yes, he's in a toxic environment. I want to give him a better life. Miss Michelle leaned forward. It won't be easy, Kelly, but if you're ready to fight, I'm with you. I felt a surge of determination. I'm ready. Whatever it takes. The legal battle that followed was tough. Scott and Olivia were unpredictable, sometimes cooperative, sometimes hostile, but I didn't back down. One evening, after a particularly hard day in court, Larry wrapped his arms around me. You're doing the right thing, Kelly. It's hard but right. I leaned into his embrace, exhausted but hopeful. I just want Jerry to be safe, to have a family that cares. The day the judge granted me temporary custody of Jerry was bittersweet. He was a sweet boy, confused and scared, but he slowly opened up to us. Lauren and Eric adored him, and he brought a new kind of joy into our home. Scott's reaction was a mix of anger and defeat. "You've taken everything from me, Kelly." I faced him, my voice steady. "I'm protecting Jerry, something you should have done." As Scott stormed off, I realized our relationship might never be repaired. But this wasn't about us. It was about a little boy who needed a stable home. Life with Jerry was a new adventure. There were challenges, of course, but also laughter and love. He was becoming a part of our family, and I was determined to make it permanent. Looking back, I knew I'd made the right decision. It was time for new beginnings for all of us, a chance to heal, grow, and build a future filled with love and stability. That was the legacy I wanted to leave, a stark contrast to the selfishness and greed that had once threatened to tear us apart. The house, once a reminder of family discord, was now filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet. Jerry had become a part of our lives, his presence a constant source of joy and wonder. One evening, as we were tucking him into bed, he looked up at me with those big innocent eyes. "Aunt Kelly, am I going to stay here forever?" I smoothed his hair, my heart swelling. "Yes, Jerry, you're part of our family now." He smiled, his tiny hand gripping mine. "I like it here. Lauren and Eric are fun." I kissed his forehead. "We love having you here, sweetie." I walked out of his room. Larry was waiting with a proud smile on his face. "He's really settling in, isn't he?" I nodded, feeling accomplished. "He is. We're giving him the life he deserves." The next day, I received a call from Miss Michelle. "Kelly, it's official. The court has granted you full custody of Jerry." I nearly dropped the phone, tears of happiness welling up. "Thank you, Miss Michelle. Thank you for everything." After hanging up, I shared the news with the family. Lauren and Eric cheered, hugging Jerry in a group embrace. Even Larry had tears in his eyes. "We're a family," Larry said, his voice choked with emotion. "A real, complete family." The journey had been long and full of challenges, but we had come out stronger. I thought about Scott and Olivia, wherever they were. I hoped they would find their way, but my focus was now on the children, our family. In the months that followed, Jerry blossomed. He was no longer the timid boy we first met. He was confident, happy, and loved. One day, while we were all in the garden, Jerry came running up to me with a dandelion in his hand. "Look, Aunt Kelly, I made a wish." I crouched down to his level. "And what did you wish for?" He grinned, his eyes sparkling. "I wished we'd all be together forever." I hugged him tight. "That's the best wish, Jerry, and it's come true." As I looked around at my family, I felt a deep sense of peace. We had weathered the storm and emerged stronger. Our future was filled with hope, love, and the promise of new beginnings. This was our story, a testament to the strength of family and the power of love. It was a future of hope, and we were ready to embrace it with open arms. My husband Larry will inherit the house, the $5 million, and the director position. When Julie heard a lawyer was there for Kyle's inheritance proceedings, she couldn't hide her joy. She walked into the living room like she owned the place. Julie, who always asked about the inheritance, and if it was done yet, must have been eagerly waiting for this day. Ignoring me, she went straight to the lawyer. The old me would have told her off, but as Julie turned her back to me, I couldn't wait to hear what she'd say next. Her greedy comments were even worse than I expected, and I laughed out loud, holding my stomach. The lawyer looked stunned, and I kept laughing at Julie's boldness. Julie didn't think it was funny and gave me a cold look. "Do you really think you'll get your father-in-law's inheritance?" I laughed at her obsession with money and her dramatic attitude. Pointing to the late-arriving Larry, she raised her voice. "The right to inherit belongs to my husband, Larry." I took a deep breath, ready to tell her the truth. "My name is Lauren, and I am 62 years old. I have been a full-time housewife, supporting my doctor husband Kyle for a long time. Even after becoming a director, he always kept working, never tired. Larry grew up watching his father and decided to follow the same path. I believe my husband had a happy and fulfilling life. However, my husband passed away at the age of 65. He was passionate about his work and believed being a doctor was his calling. Maybe his sudden death was due to overworking, but at his funeral, I felt he had no regrets. Not just his superiors and colleagues, but also subordinates and others came to the funeral. The venue was packed with people mourning him. It wasn't just medical professionals who attended. Many patients he had treated in the past came to pay their respects. I didn't know exactly how he worked since I only saw Kyle going to and from his job every day. But seeing how much he was loved reassured me that he had done the right things in his life. At the somber funeral, Julie, the eldest son's wife, seemed restless and out of place. Her face relaxed almost as if she was happy about her father-in-law's death. My suspicions were confirmed when I overheard her talking with relatives. My father-in-law was always working. I think he might have saved quite a lot since he probably didn't have much time to spend money, she said. Hearing such a statement right behind me, I couldn't believe my ears. Despite being in the middle of a funeral, Julie seemed more concerned about how her father-in-law's inheritance would be divided. Perhaps she didn't know that a daughter-in-law might not have any inheritance rights. Even so, her behavior wasn't appropriate for the funeral. Seeing her actions, Larry, the eldest son, apologized to me with a guilty look. "Mom, I'm truly sorry. No matter how many times I tell her, Julie doesn't listen." "It's not your fault, Larry, but if you feel that way, can you please firmly warn her? Many people are attending this event." I knew about Julie's behavior even before Larry mentioned it. Remembering her inexcusable attitude, I recalled how she didn't help at all while I was busy with my husband's funeral preparations. She didn't offer me any words of comfort or sympathy. To make matters worse, she was always talking about the money, asking things like, "Your husband had quite an inheritance, right? How much was it? Even if you're his wife, it's his inheritance, so don't waste it, okay? Did you come here just to say that? Is that all you have to say?" "Well, yeah, if you squander it just because you don't have long to live, I'll be in trouble." Anger and disbelief flooded over me as Julie spoke as if my late husband's assets belonged to her. Moreover, she always looked down on me and was sarcastic. I don't know why she dislikes me so much, but her comments about other people's assets have often left me disheartened. My son Larry was inspired by his father and became a doctor. Larry's earnings are not bad, but Julie has always been overly obsessed with money. She'd often call me saying things like, "I'm worried about our future with Larry's low income," or "We're short on money," hinting that she wanted financial help. Because of this, getting along with her was very challenging. I used to let things slide, but now she's targeting my husband's inheritance, and I've reached my limit. Larry's income is really unstable, so we don't have much money to spend freely. We can't afford luxuries. "Oh really? Why don't you work then? That would help with the household expenses, and you could afford some luxuries." "What? It's ridiculous for a doctor's wife to work. You're lucky since your husband earned well, and you could live comfortably." No matter how many times I tried to advise her, her attitude only worsened, and our arguments became more heated. She wouldn't even hesitate to belittle her own husband, Larry, just to look down on me. From her perspective, I'm her mother-in-law, but once married, we're family. I couldn't stand the way she treated family members with such disrespect. Thanks to my husband, I've been able to live comfortably. If she wanted the same, maybe she should respect and support her husband a bit more. If there was something about Larry to respect, then maybe. Anyway, I'm off to get my nails done and have a spa day. Don't forget about the inheritance, okay? Bye now. She just blurted out whatever she wanted and promptly left the house. Given her stormy behavior, I began to wonder how Larry was treated at home. But her self-centered actions didn't end there. During the inheritance proceedings, she continued her bad behavior, which became increasingly intolerable. Even after the funeral was over, every time she visited, she'd greet me with, "How's the inheritance coming along?" It felt like a standard greeting. Despite explaining several times that the process takes time, she either forgets or doesn't understand and constantly pressures me whenever she sees me. I've told her multiple times that she has no rights to the inheritance, but she just doesn't seem to get it. Whether she believes Larry's money is hers or has some other scheme in mind, she seems convinced she'll inherit a fortune. After discussing with Larry, or rather manipulating the conversation to her advantage, she probably intends to get a share of the inheritance. If that was all, it would be a family matter for Larry to handle. But her actions affect everyone involved, making the situation much more complicated and stressful. I shouldn't interfere, but Julie tried to steal valuable things from our house. "Julie, what are you doing?" "That's my necklace." "Oh, come on, don't be so stingy. We're family, so it's okay, right?" "I can't be friends with someone who would steal from me." "Fine then, I'll take it as an advance on the inheritance." "That's okay, right? I am being patient here." No matter how many times I told her not to act like that, she wouldn't listen to me. From the moment she took my cherished necklace, a gift from my husband, I couldn't stand it. After that, I never opened the door for her again. Even though Larry frequently messaged saying, "Mom, I'm truly sorry for Julie," he couldn't stop her. I gave up expecting anything from Larry or Julie. I didn't even have time to grieve the loss of the necklace as her harassment continued. She badmouthed me to her friends and others, calling me the worst mother-in-law who won't even let her in the house. The neighbors would say, "It looks tough," with a smile, but they showed concern. I don't understand why she hates me so much. It gives me a headache. What hurt the most was a letter I found in our mailbox. I felt disgusted just by seeing the already opened envelope. When I checked its contents, it was addressed to Larry and his wife. Whether it's Julie's idea of harassment because I won't let her in, her credit card bill was in our mailbox. Seeing the statement filled with extravagant expenses from luxury restaurants and online shopping made my blood run cold. "Larry, there's a credit card bill for Julie in our mailbox. It was already opened and checked. What's the meaning of this?" "Huh? I have no idea. It seems like she has spent a lot. She always talks about her income to me. Is everything okay?" "Well, it's actually tough. Mom, I'm sorry to ask, but could you pay it for us?" Wanting to complain, I contacted Larry. However, whether under Julie's influence or due to the power dynamics in his household, he said something unbelievable, leaving me speechless. I wondered why I needed to help them. Why would he even think I'd assist them? He can't even retrieve the cherished necklace from his wife. What is he even saying? I also harshly criticized his behavior, which seemed to only remember things convenient for him. "I've already done my part in supporting you as a parent. Why would an adult like you burden their parent and ask for help?" "Well, we have Dad's inheritance, right? You won't be able to use it all by yourself. Please, I thought you'd help." There's a saying about a thief acting brazenly after committing theft, and now I get it. "Larry, you and Julie are really a match made in heaven. I'm cutting ties. Stay away from me." I could tell from the other end of the phone that he wasn't taking what I was saying seriously. I was so furious with his attitude. After hanging up, I immediately threw the bill into the trash. The idea that Julie might have deliberately put it in our mailbox, assuming I'd pay, was unbelievable. Most of all, it was an inconceivable act and made me question her as a person. "Do you think I haven't thought about it? Is there really a way to get the inheritance? Kyle, what should I do?" I asked my husband's photo, picking it up unconsciously. From my anger and disappointment towards Larry and Julie, I've lost understanding of how to handle my emotions. Is it really okay to proceed with the inheritance as it is? Amidst my insecurities, I somehow gathered courage. I hope someday they get what they deserve. Frustrated by their appalling behavior, I dealt with the inheritance proceedings alone. Perhaps my feelings got through, as I found out my husband had left a will, and in it, something was written. After reading the will my husband left behind, I resolved to protect myself and get back at them. Phew, I'm glad it seems Kyle was on my side after all. Thank you, I whispered, holding back tears and pressing the will to my chest. I regained my composure. I clenched my fist, deciding I wouldn't just do nothing and let those two dictate things. I decided to wait for the right moment to make a big move against them. Maybe because I felt relieved at the thought of being able to retaliate for all the suffering, I completely forgot about Julie's bill. I would have thrown it away from the start, not intending to pay, but she must have received a reminder. This time, I received a message from her, even though I had told her the inheritance proceedings were not yet completed. There were false accusations that I wanted to control everything. Her words seemed to attack me. It's because you haven't settled the inheritance yet. I'll wait a little longer, but please do it as soon as possible. Oh, by the way, you saw the bill I left in the mailbox, right? Please make that payment. What are you talking about? Stop joking. Why do you think you're entitled to the inheritance? Oh, come on, Larry is the eldest son, right? It's only natural for him to get an inheritance, isn't it? Do they think I know nothing? Julie scoffed and said with a smirk, Larry has a right to inherit because he's the eldest son. In general, this is not incorrect. Even after Julie said all this, I still haven't told them the important thing. Even if I don't tell them, it's their own problem, and they should naturally know about it. But for them, who only think conveniently, it might be hard to realize. I'm waiting for the perfect moment when they fall apart, watching for the right timing. And finally, that time came. It was when I had explained the situation to the lawyer, and after the proceedings were finished with his cooperation, I finalized the plan. I will contact Larry when the procedure is complete. After discussing with the lawyer, to me it's just a routine communication. But as expected, Julie came to my house with a face filled with joy. I deliberately left the front door unlocked. Without any suspicion, she opened the door and stomped in. Seeing her, I could hardly hold back my laughter. I've been waiting for so long. Isn't it terrible? You've been reluctant to complete the procedure and won't give up the inheritance. Oh, Julie, what brings you here? Is this gentleman the lawyer? I am July, Larry's wife. Ignoring me completely, she headed straight to the lawyer sitting in front of me. Normally, I would reprimand her for such rude behavior, but this time I held back and waited. She turned her back on me, ignoring me, and approached the lawyer. I was excited to hear what she would say next. Finally, we will inherit this house, $5 million, and the director's position because Larry is the eldest son, she said. Her greedy remark was more than I expected, and I laughed out loud, holding my stomach. The audacity of her and the lawyer's stunned face made it even funnier, and I kept laughing. Of course, Julie didn't find the situation amusing and glared at me coldly. Hey, what's so funny? Are you upset that we are taking the inheritance? No, why? $5 million? How did you come up with that amount? Come on, your husband worked as a doctor for a long time, right? He probably didn't have time to spend money. It's obvious that there's that much money. Unless, have you already used it? I genuinely laughed at her obsession with money. Whatever I choose to do with my inheritance is my business, and you have no right to complain. However, it seems she doesn't like the idea of me inheriting. How many times have I told you, since you don't have much longer to live, don't do anything reckless. Even if you're related by marriage, it's quite something to say that to me, your elder. Didn't I tell you that you have no right to inherit? Julie, wearing the necklace she stole from me, glared at me sharply. I have no intention of letting her take anything more precious from me. I made up my mind not to lose to her, who is self-centered, greedy, and obsessed with money. I clenched my fist. Pointing to the late-arriving Larry, Julie exclaimed loudly, "The right to inherit belongs to my husband, Larry." Taking a deep breath, I decided to tell them the truth. "You see, there shouldn't be any inheritance for you two to claim. Larry, isn't that right?" "Huh? Why, Mom? What do you mean?" "Oh, don't you have any idea? Aren't you forgetting something?" "Wait, are you talking about that issue? It was resolved a long time ago, wasn't it?" "Duh, what are you even talking about? Truly disappointing. What have you made amends for? What's resolved? Don't talk nonsense." "Wait a minute, what are you talking about?" I was taken aback by her demeanor, as if she had completely forgotten or knew nothing about the issue, even though it was a situation she caused. It seemed she couldn't remember it. I decided to explain the situation in detail for them to understand. Larry had married Julie a few years back. However, before that, he was already married to another woman and had a child with her. Despite having a family, he neglected them to have an affair with Julie. After their affair, Larry and Julie got married. The truth came out when Larry came begging Kyle, unable to pay alimony and child support on his own. "Larry, what were you thinking? I never thought you would stoop this low. I had no other choice if I wanted to marry Julie." "What are you saying? You're the one who committed the wrongdoing. Even if you are my son, don't expect me to pay for your mistakes. Larry, take responsibility and sort it out." "Why? You can help me a bit. As a doctor, you are constantly working and don't have time to spend money, so you must have some to spare, right?" Larry's audacious remark pushed my husband's anger to its peak. When Larry started making excuses about being overwhelmed with newlywed life and needing money for their wedding, my husband decided to cast aside his feelings as a parent and choose his grandchild instead. "Fine, I'll pay on your behalf. There's no need for my grandchild to suffer because of a terrible father like you." "Dad, don't say it in such a sarcastic way. I'm your son, you know." "Exactly, that's the point. And in exchange, I won't support you in any way from now on. And of course, don't expect to inherit a single thing from me." Larry probably thought that my husband's words were just declarations made in the heat of the moment. But my husband believed that someone who abandons their family doesn't deserve to be celebrated. He neither attended the wedding nor offered any support. "Dad, just let it go. In the future, you'll rely on us for care, right? We are family, so try to compromise a bit." "No way. Why would I bother with someone like you?" Knowing that his father had money, Larry had previously mentioned the need for future care and requested support. However, my husband didn't listen to Larry's words, and as he declared, he made sure it was written in his will. It clearly stated that everything should go to his wife and grandchild. My husband, with his strict personality, had meticulously written and prepared the will to ensure that not even a small amount of money would go to Larry and his wife. This fact became known when my husband's lawyer showed the will during the funeral proceedings. He said he had received the will from my husband in advance. Remembering the anger at that time brings up emotions, but I deeply thanked my husband for his foresight and protection. My husband left a will stating that even though Larry is his son, he does not have the right to inherit his father's estate. When the lawyer read the contents of the will, Larry and Julie were shocked. I decided to add insult to injury. "Oh, by the way, Julie, you took things from our house, right? You said it was like an advance on the inheritance. But you heard the will the lawyer read, right? You have no rights, so give it back. It was a gift from my husband to me." I pointed to the necklace she was wearing. She threw the necklace at me with a visibly angry attitude, clicking her tongue and glaring at me. Probably because the lawyer was present, she couldn't say anything reckless. I didn't hear about this. I thought I'd finally get my father-in-law's inheritance. I came all the way here today. What's going on? Really? When you announced your marriage, you said being pursued meant you were more attractive, so it was inevitable, right? You knew what you were getting into when you got with him while he already had a family. I remembered how furious I was at her attitude back then. I used to think Larry was deceived by such a terrible woman, but now I realize they are a perfectly matched couple. I will definitely inherit. Oh, there is the hospital. It would be troublesome if the director was absent, right? This kind of succession is usually done by the son. Too bad, it's already been handed over to a competent subordinate. Huh? Why? Isn't it normal for the son to take over? Haha, to begin with, you're doing something that's not normal, right? It's your own doing. Realize that you're not the norm. She was desperate for the inheritance, whether it be the hospital or the house. In the end, she clung to the lawyer, asking, "Then what can I get?" But the lawyer my husband had contracted wouldn't easily tell her. He repeatedly explained the contents of the will, stating, "The two of you have no inheritance rights," and responded calmly, "This is unbelievable. I don't believe it. It must be a mistake." Really, no matter how much you fuss, nothing will change. Even if you sue, you'll just end up embarrassed. If you're okay with that, feel free to do so. Perhaps finding my cold treatment unbearable, she stormed out of the house with a face as red as a boiled octopus. I watched her leave with Larry. I held the necklace and quietly pumped my fist in triumph. After that, she never contacted me or visited the house again, and the inheritance procedures were completed smoothly. I was worried they would confront Larry's ex-wife, who has a grandchild, but Larry, who doesn't even pay child support, wouldn't know her contact details, so there were no issues. Larry and Julie, who didn't get any inheritance, seemed to be having a big quarrel. Julie told Larry, "I married you thinking I would get a big inheritance from your father," and they are apparently on the brink of divorce. The saying, "end of money, end of love," fits them perfectly. I only received one contact from Larry, saying, "Give me the money or house you inherited," but I naturally ignored it. I exclaimed, "Don't talk nonsense while you're awake," and hung up the phone. I sighed, wondering where I went wrong raising my son, but there was also good news. A letter arrived from Larry's ex-wife stating that the inheritance procedures were completed. In it, along with an update, there was a photo of my cute grandchild and words of gratitude. "Thank you for being such wonderful grandparents," it said. "They are living very happily now." The grandchild my husband had been concerned about until the end is growing up healthy and living happily with her new father. There was also a lovely family photo in the letter, and although I felt guilt as a parent, my mood was brightened and my heart warmed. I was very happy and immediately read the letter in front of my husband's altar to report to him. I was continuously disappointed by Larry's actions and words. However, I was able to report to my husband about the grandchild, which always brought a smile to his face, and I was happy and satisfied. When I sharply snapped back, Julie yelled at me, "Stop leeching off Dad." Hearing Julie's angry voice, I made up my mind that it was no use. I gave up in my heart. My feelings for Julie did not reach her. The emotional bond I was trying to establish with Julie was broken. Julie needs to reflect on her actions and face the consequences. I will tell her the truth. My name is Kelly, and I am 53 years old. I have been married to Jerry for 8 years. Both Jerry and I had been married before we met each other. I divorced my previous husband because he had an affair. One day when I came home, I found divorce papers from the lawyer in the mail. Since then, my ex-husband never returned. I didn't even know where he was, but I submitted the response to the court. We used to argue a lot and weren't very close, so I had expected this to happen someday. But it was so sudden that I couldn't eat and felt very depressed. I couldn't just sit around, so I threw myself into my work. I filled the void in my personal life with work. I worked frantically and studied marketing and management. Thanks to that, I didn't think about remarriage or dating, and before I knew it, I was 42. My family runs a small diner. It's a cozy place that serves set meals during the day. The food is good, plentiful, and affordable, making it popular with the townsfolk. It's a small town, but almost everyone must have eaten our food at least once. My father's chicken steak is the restaurant's specialty. When Jerry proposed to me, I was over the moon, but hearing that he had a daughter made me anxious about the future. Will this work out? The thought of suddenly becoming the mother of an adult daughter was crushing. My happy feelings completely deflated. Now my heart feels heavy and dark. That's when I got a text from Jerry saying, "No rush on your response." I meant every word I said earlier. His calm reply soothed my anxious heart like a receding tide. Yes, Jerry is serious and kind. He would support me through anything. As for his daughter Julie, even though she's a concern, she's an adult and won't act like a child. She will understand about Jerry and me. I decided to accept Jerry's proposal. When I told Jerry I would accept his proposal, he was overjoyed. Seeing Jerry express his happiness so openly made me truly glad to have chosen to be with him. Since we were both remarrying, we just had a small dinner to introduce each other to our families. But Julie was in the worst mood I had ever seen. She was irritable and took out her feelings on the staff, saying, "So annoying, come on, bring the next dish." I asked her to calm down, and she snapped back, "Shut up, don't order me around, old lady." The term old lady took my breath away. I had met Julie a few times before, but this was the first time things had turned out this way. Is this Julie's true nature? After the introduction party, I discussed Julie's behavior with Jerry. Perhaps we should consider postponing the marriage, I suggested. Wouldn't it be better if Julie sorted out her feelings first? Jerry shook his head. Indeed, Julie's attitude today was problematic, but she has already moved out of the house, and we won't be seeing her every day. Being tied down by an independent daughter forever doesn't seem right to me. Jerry suggested that being confined during today's introduction party might have irritated Julie. Normally, Julie is quiet and not the kind to get angry like that. Please give Julie a chance. She's really a good kid at heart, he encouraged. Encouraged by Jerry's words, I decided to proceed with the marriage. I was determined to marry Jerry and live my life with him. Yet every time I saw Julie, I was reminded of that incident, which only increased my anxiety. I started living with Jerry, and we bought an apartment halfway between my company and Jerry's. Julie was living alone in an apartment near her company, so it was just Jerry and me living together. The first 3 years passed without any problems, and we were happy. The only tough part was during the holiday season when we met Julie, but other than that, it was peaceful. However, in the 5th year of our marriage, we faced a big problem. Julie moved in with us because her apartment was undergoing major renovations. She said the noise and the workers coming and going were too much, so she moved in with us. I had a bad feeling about it, and I was right. We turned a room we used as a storeroom into Julie's room. She complained that it was cramped and poorly lit, but we convinced her to tolerate it. For the moving-in celebration, we decided to have pizza. When I was about to order our usual delivery, Julie went ahead and placed an order from a famous steakhouse. The dishes from there are delicious but very expensive, about 4 times more than the food we usually eat. I was about to refuse, but Jerry gave me a look. I've recently realized that Jerry is lenient with Julie. He tends to give in to her whims, and perhaps that's why she gets upset easily when things don't go her way. She generally has an attitude and seems to think of the staff in any store as her servants. I've never seen Julie use words like "excuse me" or "thank you" to the staff, or even to me. Living with Julie was like that. I was feeling down, but this was too much to worry about from the start. In the end, we ordered the food Julie wanted. When the dishes arrived, Julie complained that it was late. Our order was supposed to be refused at first due to the sudden order, but Julie insisted and made them deliver. She complained that they were late. I apologized profusely to the delivery person while receiving the dishes. The payment, of course, came from our wallet. As I checked the contents of the 3 delivery boxes, I felt even more stressed. I found 2 assortments of appetizers and steaks and 1 box of hot dogs. Puzzled, I laid out the food on the table and began preparing drinks and soup. Julie and Jerry took their seats. Julie poured beer for Jerry, raised her glass with his, and began to drink. To Julie, I must be nothing more than a servant or maid. Jerry doesn't correct her. Is something going on? When I sat down at the dining table, in front of me was the box of hot dogs. I let out a soft and Julie looked at me with a smug half-smile. "That should be enough for you," she said with a snort, then began eating the appetizers. I had some vegetable sticks while Julie enjoyed the shrimp cocktail, fresh salad, and chicken wings. It was a clear act of spite from Julie towards me. I thought this would surely anger Jerry, but all he did was sigh as he looked at Julie. He offered his box of appetizers to me, saying, "Have some of this." I nodded slightly and took some portions from Jerry. I was tempted to scold Julie but restrained myself, considering that a confrontation on the first day might complicate our future living together. Moreover, I felt like I had taken Jerry away from Julie. Living with Julie started in the worst possible way. Jerry doesn't talk much about Julie. Whenever I ask about her, he just says, "She's at a difficult age, please forgive her." While working, helping out at my parents' house, studying, and doing household chores, I was already swamped. Now I had to take care of Julie on top of everything. Julie is simply selfish. She does nothing around the house. It's hard to believe she lived alone before. Moreover, Julie's requests are incredibly bothersome. Even a single piece of clothing came with a litany of instructions. Which items required dry cleaning, which should be hand-washed, and which needed air drying. When it comes to food, she specifies supermarkets and even the origin of the products. I usually plan meals based on sales and featured items at the supermarket, but that's not possible when accommodating Julie's preferences. I found myself planning meals while also checking recipes on the internet. As a result, our household expenses have nearly doubled. Julie doesn't contribute financially to the household at all. Even when I talk to Jerry about it, he just says, "Please bear with it." Unwilling to stir up unnecessary conflict, I chose to tolerate the situation. I reluctantly decided to cut back on work. I was valued and had high expectations at my company, with even hints of a possible executive position in the future. But now, family comes first. I applied for reduced working hours at the company. This decision will likely end any chance of career advancement, but I did it for Jerry and Julie. I've decided to endure. While shopping for dinner at the supermarket after work, I received a call from my mother. She told me that my father had been hospitalized. "What? Dad's in the hospital," I said. After hanging up, I hurried to the hospital. Our family home is relatively close by, so I arrived in about an hour. In the hospital room, my father was watching a baseball game on TV with earphones in. Noticing me, he took out his earphones and smiled. "Mom just exaggerated over the phone," he said with a laugh. Relieved, my legs gave way, and I slumped to the floor. "My back's been hurting," my father explained. "It seems years of standing at work have taken a toll on it. I've decided to go through with the surgery," he told me with a laugh. At that moment of relief, I remembered something important. I hadn't informed Jerry or Julie about any of this. I pulled out my cell phone from my shopping bag and saw countless missed calls from Julie. My heart was pounding as I hurriedly called her back. Julie's voice sounded displeased. "Where are you, and what are you doing? Hurry back and make my dinner," she demanded. I apologized reflexively. "I'm sorry, my dad's been hospitalized." Julie was silent for a moment, but then started scolding me sharply. "Huh? Your dad? Your dad really?" Julie's tone became vulgar and aggressive. I felt intimidated and shrank back. In a small voice, I replied, "Yes, he was suddenly hospitalized." "And what does that have to do with my dinner?" Julie's reasoning was becoming absurd. "You're my mother, right? Understand it's a parent's job to make meals for their child. This might be understandable if Julie were still in elementary or middle school, but Julie is 25 and has lived alone before. She's fully an adult. For such an adult to demand meals from a parent is beyond harassment. I felt compelled to stand up for myself. I'm not good with Julie's assertive tone or harsh words. Although I was scared of being yelled at, I decided to confront her. Is it wrong to worry about my dad? You should understand, I said. I could hear Julie gasp over the phone. Shut up, don't talk back to me, she snapped, clearly taken aback. If it were your dad, you'd rush to his side, wouldn't you? Julie fell silent. Maybe she was imagining if it were Jerry who had been suddenly hospitalized. Surely Julie would be worried if something happened to Jerry. That's what I thought. However, Julie's response was shocking. I'd ignore it if my dad was hospitalized, she said. I was speechless. I wanted to believe it was a lie. Anyway, I said, sorry, but you'll need to eat out today, and hung up. This call made one thing clear to me. Julie doesn't see me as her mother. In fact, she doesn't even see me as a person. She must think of me as a mechanical servant or a slave. Otherwise, she couldn't say such heartless things. It's saddening, but I can't just dwell on sadness. Things can't go on like this. I felt a strong need to take action. Even after my father is discharged, he won't be able to work as before. There's only so much my mother can do. I need to address the situation at my family's home quickly. Balancing my family's needs, taking care of Julie, household chores, and work was impossible. I decided to resign from my job. Though the company tried hard to retain me, there was no other way. Just as my father was discharged and we managed to reopen our shop, something happened to Jerry. He ended up being hospitalized and his condition was quite severe. Dr. Richard, the chief physician, said he might never be discharged. When I informed Julie of Jerry's condition, she reacted nonchalantly and said something unbelievable. Does this mean it's going to cost a lot of money? Julie seemed more concerned about money than Jerry's health. What could this mean? I couldn't understand her reasoning. Does Julie not care about Jerry at all? This is not the time to worry about money. Do you understand? I became emotional and retorted. I know that, but if we don't have money, we'll be in trouble, won't we? Julie pulled out her cell phone and started making the call. Hello, Uncle David? Actually, Dad is sick and has been hospitalized, she said in an uncomfortably sweet tone. I was hoping you could help with the hospital bills. Julie schemed on the phone, trying to get her uncle to pay for the expenses. Then you can ask Mom about the rest. After ending the call, Julie gave me a cold smile, sending a chill down my spine. So you'll have to talk things over with Uncle David, she said, humming a tune as she went back to her room. I was still reeling from Jerry's hospitalization when Julie's actions left me stunned. After a while, I received a call from my brother-in-law. I explained Jerry's condition and the outlook for the future. I broke down crying midway, but managed to explain everything. I also assured him that I would take care of the hospital bills, so he shouldn't worry. After hanging up, I slapped my cheeks with both hands to psych myself up. I can't afford to mope around over this. But bad things continued to happen. After our marriage, Jerry was entrusted with managing his parents' company. However, the business began to struggle. The cost of raw materials had been rising for years, leading to higher purchase prices and reduced profits. The company was so strapped that it couldn't afford to pay employees' salaries. In the past, Jerry's family used to help my family's business, but now the roles were reversed, and my family was supporting Jerry's company. With the business in trouble, Jerry had cut his own salary, so I was paying for the hospital bills with my salary. Most of the insurance policies list the company as the beneficiary. Ironically, Jerry's insurance money gave the company a bit of a breather during these hard times. In such a difficult time, Julie lashed out at me. The reason was a photo on my phone of a dining scene at a restaurant. Don't mess around using other people's money for such luxury, Julie berated me with vulgar language and an aggressive tone. The photo was from a time I was asked to sample dishes at a restaurant I visited for work. A client took the photo and sent it to me, but unfortunately, it backfired. "You're using our money for stuff like this." Julie's words made me realize something. It seems she's under the impression that I'm living off Jerry's money. The reality is quite the opposite. Currently, I'm the one providing for most of our household expenses. I've repaid all the money I borrowed from Jerry in the past with interest. Julie's anger didn't subside. It seemed futile to say anything at the moment. Julie's command, "Get out," compelled me to leave the house. I left a single piece of paper on the dining table and chose to spend the night at a hotel. It would be useless to explain anything to Julie. If I tried to explain, she might start depending on my money, and I wanted to avoid that. I resolved to stick to my plan and take appropriate action. I made a promise to myself. I went to visit Jerry's hospital room. I visit every day, but today felt special. Julie didn't come today either. Jerry gave me a sad smile, and his smile always reassured me. "I'm sorry for being so inadequate," I said. Jerry shook his head. "It's not that. It's my fault Julie turned out this way because of me." Jerry began to share something he hadn't told me about Julie before. Julie is not Jerry's biological child. His ex-wife had an affair, and Julie was the result. Jerry found out just before his ex-wife passed away. Hearing this, Jerry felt an indescribable anger. The person most at fault was lying in bed, soon to pass away, and he couldn't direct his anger anywhere. Julie wasn't to blame, and she still thinks of Jerry as her real father. His ex-wife passed away without revealing anything about the other man involved. Jerry was left with unresolved anger. He couldn't treat Julie the same way as before and ended up pushing her away. For Julie, her mother suddenly disappeared, and her father became distant. It's no surprise her personality became twisted. From that point on, Julie ceased to trust anyone, viewing Jerry solely as a financial resource. Since then, I've become nothing but an ATM to Julie, Jerry said with a sad smile. Julie's selfishness is excessive, and her disdain for others is over the top. Julie found out I wasn't her real father when she was in high school, Jerry said. She didn't seem that surprised. She must have had her suspicions, he added with a sarcastic smile. I explained to Jerry what I was about to do. Initially, he looked reluctant, his expression conveying a sense of skepticism, as if questioning, "Is all that really necessary? I've already looked into it. If I don't do it, things could get even worse," I told him. "If I don't, someone else surely will." Jerry closed his eyes, deep in thought. I decided to wait quietly. After a while, Jerry opened his eyes. "All right, I'll leave it to you." I held Jerry's hand. His hand felt bony and had become much smaller. I struggled to hold back my tears, forcing a smile. I left the hospital room and stepped into the corridor where I saw Dr. Richard. I handed him a scientific magazine showcasing the latest medical technologies. "Please help my husband," I said to him and left the hospital. Now it was just a matter of taking action. To psych myself up, I slapped both of my cheeks sharply with my hands. This always helps me focus. After spending a night at a hotel, I checked my cell phone for messages and returned home before noon the next day. I could hear the sound of the TV and Julie's laughter coming from the living room. Julie was watching TV and laughing heartily. It was a rare sight. She's usually in a foul mood, but today she seemed happy. Looking around, I noticed that several things were missing. The photos of Jerry and me, souvenirs from our trips, and other decorative items were gone. Some things are missing, I said to myself, prompting a reaction from Julie. "Oh, I threw them out your stuff," she said. Shocked, I entered the bedroom. The room was empty. No computer, no TV, no stereo, even the bed and furniture were gone. The closet was empty too. I returned to the living room and confronted Julie. "What's the meaning of this?" I demanded. Julie looked at me with disdain while lying on the sofa. "They were needless, so I disposed of them," she said. I put my hands on my hips, visibly angry. "Needless? What are you going to do?" When I raised my voice, Julie made a face of disgust, averted her gaze, and sighed dramatically. "I'm tired of living with you," she said. Julie's words were outrageous. "What do you mean by that?" "This home belongs to Jerry and me," I retorted sharply. Julie's face turned sour. "Stop leeching off Dad," she said. "Leeching? What could she possibly mean by that?" Julie suddenly brought up something unexpected. Come to think of it, she had mentioned our money before. Could Julie be under some grand misunderstanding? As I stood there unable to respond, Julie's irritation grew. "Do I have to spell it out for you? I'm saying stop depending on Dad's money," she said. Julie and I never got along well, but I had always tried to be considerate towards her. I complied with all of Julie's requests, even those that felt like harassment, because I wanted to get along with her. As the second wife, I've always strived to be kind and loving. Feeling somewhat guilty, I still received such treatment in return. I wasn't leeching off anyone. I was just trying to do everything for Julie. I wanted to tell her this, but the words wouldn't come. While I struggled to speak, Julie added insult to injury. "Dad's not coming back anyway, so there's no reason for you to be here." "That's not true," I replied. Julie raised her voice. "Shut up. I don't want to hear your excuses." Hearing her hysterical voice, I made up my mind. It was no use. I realized I gave up in my heart. My feelings for Julie did not reach her. The emotional bond I was trying to build with her was broken. I felt my feelings for Julie fading. Just a moment ago, I thought of us as family, but now we're complete strangers. From the beginning, it was clear Julie was only using me for her own convenience. That's why she could so boldly drive me away. Julie needs to reflect on her actions and face the consequences. I resolved to confront Julie with the truth. Determined, I locked eyes with Julie. Julie looked back at me with fearful eyes. "What? Got a problem?" "No, I'll leave, just as you wish," I said. I checked other rooms, the bathroom, and the toilet. "Don't bother looking. Everything's gone." "I had it picked up by a collection service," Julie said. I picked up a flyer from the living room. "That's the place I asked them," she added. The flyer was just there conveniently. This was something I had left in the living room. I almost let out a laugh at Julie's shallowness. Forcing a stern face, I glared at Julie. "I hope you come to realize the gravity of your actions." With those parting words, I immediately left the house. As soon as I stepped out of the apartment, I contacted the waste collection service that had emailed me in the morning. The collection service had kept my belongings in storage. Not only did they store them, but they also moved them into the storage unit I had rented. I thanked them politely over the phone before hanging up. I intentionally left that flyer on the living room table. I thought Julie might just do something like that, given her personality. Seeking out a collection agency would have likely been too bothersome for her. I figured that if a flyer for a junk removal service was readily available on the table, Julie might be inclined to call the listed number. I was willing to forgive her if she didn't go that far, but Julie went through with it. My patience finally ran out. I went to the hospital to see Jerry. It seemed Jerry was getting some explanation from Dr. Richard when I entered the room. Dr. Richard left as I walked in. Jerry's face was unusually happy. It was a shame I had to bring up such a topic when he was in a good mood. Reluctantly, I shared the earlier incident with Jerry. His face immediately clouded over. "But it can't be helped, right?" I said, gently holding Jerry's thin hand. "Thank you for understanding," Jerry replied. In fact, I had already decided where I was moving to. Anticipating this situation, I had prepared a new place. Even if I wasn't kicked out, there was a chance I would leave on my own. Either way, I needed a new place. I planned to move and start a new life with a fresh mindset. It's just that things are happening a bit sooner than planned. Jerry smiled gently, comforting me. To be honest, being kicked out by Julie didn't really put me in a bind. It just moved my plans up by a couple of weeks. But now I'd have to live in a hotel for 3 weeks. Maybe it's my frugality that makes me think it's a waste. Regardless, I resolved in my heart to be prepared for whatever Julie might do next. I started taking the actions I had prepared for in advance. Once the move was successfully completed and I had settled down, Julie called me. As soon as I answered, Julie's loud voice filled my ear. "You took our money, didn't you?" she accused. I played dumb and asked, what are you talking about?" My feigned ignorance seemed to infuriate Julie further. "Don't play dumb. It's about Dad's hospital bills. The hospital just called saying they need to be paid." I was expecting this call around now. "Oh, that," I replied in a deliberately relaxed tone. I purposely hesitated and sighed. "You should pay it. It's not my concern anymore. You have the living expenses that Dad transferred, right? Just pay it out of that." "That's true, but I don't have the bank book or ATM card for that account," Julie said. Julie should have the insurance documents and bank books, but the account balance is almost empty. "The balance is gone. You must have taken it," she accused desperately. The more heated Julie became, the more calmly I behaved. "I didn't take it," I said. I said with a composed face, "Don't lie. Who else could have used it?" I struggled to suppress my laughter. Ever since Jerry's salary significantly decreased, there has hardly been any money in that account. A simple bank statement update would reveal this, but Julie probably hadn't done that. There was just very little money to begin with. Even with this explanation, Julie wasn't satisfied. "If you can't pay the hospital bills, you should just use your own salary," I suggested. Julie remained silent. Given Julie's spendthrift nature, it's unlikely she has any savings. She tends to spend her salary as soon as she gets it. I knew how much Julie earned because Jerry had previously informed me about her earnings. Moreover, Jerry even used to give Julie an allowance. "You're old enough to have some savings, aren't you?" I said. I could almost hear Julie grinding her teeth. After a long silence, so long I thought the call had dropped, Julie suddenly raised her voice. "What's wrong with me spending the money I earned?" Julie continued to rant. "You're the one who spent all the money Dad gave us, aren't you?" I could hear Julie's heavy breathing. The farce was over, so I got to the heart of the matter. "If it's not savings, then use the money you acquired dishonestly," I said. I heard a thud. It seemed Julie dropped her cell phone, probably too shocked to keep a grip on it. "How did you know about that?" Julie didn't deny it. She had just admitted to the wrongdoing. There was no escaping it now. "We will discuss the details when we meet," I told Julie and hung up. I had sent the meeting place via email. I also attached the audio file of Julie saying, "How did you know about that?" to the email. I had recorded the conversation with Julie. It's always wise to have evidence on hand. I had arranged a meeting with Julie, and all that was left was to present my evidence. The next day, Julie showed up at the agreed meeting place. It was the entrance to the apartment building where I lived. I called out to Julie. Julie looked up, surprised. "Here? Yes, I sent you the address, didn't I?" Julie craned her neck to look up. "You live in this tower?" she asked, staring at the tallest and most expensive apartment building in the area. An Italian sports car was even parked at the entrance. "This place is worth over $1 million, isn't it?" Julie muttered. I led the astonished Julie to my apartment, which is close to the top floor. Even with the high-speed elevator, it takes a while to reach the top. During the ride, Julie was nervously biting her nails and trembling, clearly sensing something bad was about to happen. Upon arriving, I unlocked the door with my cell phone, which also serves as a key. Julie looked at me with a surprised expression. I entered the room without minding her reaction. The living room offers a panoramic view. The apartment we used to live in looks tiny from up here. The living room is spacious with a generous layout, and the kitchen is large. I had Julie sit on the sofa. She was clutching her bag tightly, clearly tense. I made some coffee and handed it to her. Julie took the cup with a rattling sound, trying not to drop it. "It's too spacious. It's unsettling," I said mockingly, smiling at Julie. She remained silent. "I've been preparing to live here for a while," I continued. Julie must have thought of me as a parasite living off Jerry. No wonder she was shocked. "Shall we start the discussion then? This is Scott, my lawyer," I introduced Scott, who was waiting in the back, to Julie. She seemed too overwhelmed to even notice Scott. Her gaze was unsettled, darting around nervously. Ignoring Julie's state, Scott began laying out documents on the table. Julie barely responded to my attempts to engage her in conversation, distracted by the room. Just when I thought we couldn't have a proper discussion, Julie mumbled, "How could you afford such a penthouse?" Figuring she was curious, I answered, "Julie, I just bought it the regular way." "Don't lie. How could you afford it?" she asked. I had the income to afford it. As my family's small restaurant began to recover, I not only advised, but also got actively involved in its management. The business flourished in an exciting way, and I quit my corporate job as I got busier. Julie likely assumed I had become merely a housewife after leaving my job. We turned the small restaurant into a corporation, and I became an executive. The business was doing well, expanding into multiple outlets like a specialty grilled chicken restaurant and a fine dining place. "That's why I could easily afford this penthouse apartment," I explained. "I earned that much." I shared the story of my family's business. Julie only knew that Jerry had helped when my family's restaurant was struggling. I then told her how my family's business eventually came to support Jerry's company, and that I had become an executive. Hearing my story, Julie slumped in defeat. I wondered if Julie was feeling regret, but she suddenly looked up and said something unexpected. "All right, I'll live here too. Let's make up." What is she talking about? I thought, but I just silently stared at Julie. "There's enough space here for my room too, right?" she asked. I glared at Julie with a cold look. "Save your dreaming for when you're actually asleep." She was completely unfazed by my sarcasm. "I'm serious," she said. That's when Scott cleared his throat. He probably couldn't bear to go along with Julie's absurd statements any longer. Scott handed Julie a bill. Looking at the bill, Julie's face turned pale, her hands trembled, and sweat formed on her forehead. "This is a fraudulent bill. It's a phantom charge," Scott stated. After graduating from college, Julie had worked at Jerry's company. However, she conspired with a client company to make unjust charges to the company. The illicit gains were shared with the accomplice from the client company. To set Julie up, I had hired a detective and conducted a thorough investigation. An individual from the client company who conspired with Julie leaked information to Scott. I immediately consulted with my in-laws, who had stepped down from the presidency to become chairpersons, about the matter. They were furious and promised appropriate punishment. "Embezzlement on the job is quite the crime indeed," Scott added. "If convicted of fraud, you could face up to 11 years in prison, not to mention civil damages." "Wait a minute, there must be some mistake." Julie desperately tried to deny it. However, the evidence was complete, and the accomplice had confessed. "Admit it. The charges against you are only getting heavier," Scott said. Just as I thought, Julie was gripping the bill tightly enough to tear it. She suddenly stood up. "I'm sorry," Julie apologized. "Sorry doesn't cut it," I spoke in a flat, emotionless voice. "Especially since you've done it habitually, it's deemed extremely malicious." Julie collapsed to the floor and began to apologize. "Please forgive me," Julie sobbed. "No chance," I replied coldly. Her face became a mess of tears, and her usually perfect makeup was completely ruined. "If things continue this way, losing your job will be the least of your worries. You might even get arrested." Julie's apologies wouldn't earn her forgiveness. Her tears and runny nose left dark stains on the carpet. "Please forgive me. Just staying silent about it is enough," she pleaded. I turned my back on Julie, who kept apologizing. This isn't just between you and me, I said. Julie seemed unable to let go and made an outrageous offer. Then I'll give you money. I'll charge the company again and give you that money. I sighed deeply and pressed my hand to my forehead. Nothing I said would make a difference now. Julie had no intention of repenting. She was solely focused on navigating her way out of the predicament. There's no helping you. You need to be properly judged, I said, revealing the voice recorder in my hand. Julie realized she had made an outrageous proposal. She trembled, covering her mouth with her hand. I'll submit this as evidence to the police, I declared. Julie kept her head down, as if something had been drained from her. Scott and I then escorted Julie out of the room. Leaning against the wall, she staggered toward the elevator. Once Scott had departed, I collapsed into the depths of the sofa, exhausted. It was finally over. I reported the outcome to Jerry via email. As planned, Julie was criminally charged by the company. She was arrested, and the employee from the partner company was indicted. While on bail, Julie had been dating this employee. Whether Julie really had romantic feelings is unclear. It's highly possible she pretended to like him just to use him. Julie is now detained in a holding cell awaiting trial. She also faces a lawsuit for damages from the company. Julie was disliked at the company, and perhaps this was a form of retribution. Being the president's daughter, she was exceedingly unpopular among the employees. She also had a haughty attitude toward clients, which negatively impacted performance. Not only was her attitude presumptuous, but Julie also made many mistakes. There were numerous complaints, but no one dared to criticize her because she was the president's daughter. This is what I heard from Jerry. Jerry is still hospitalized, focusing on his treatment. He entrusted the presidency to Gary, his reliable executive vice president. This decision had been made quite a while ago. With Julie gone, the transition proceeded smoothly. Jerry is fighting his illness despite the challenges in getting discharged. A pioneering treatment available in France offered new hope. Holding the published scientific journal, Dr. Richard and I had many discussions. Dr. Richard understood and agreed, and Jerry will soon go to France for treatment. Of course, it's private healthcare not covered by insurance. I'm not worried about the treatment costs. If necessary, I can just sell the penthouse. Jerry will surely recover, and he will surely smile at me with that gentle smile again. I can hardly wait for that day. Ever since I ended up in a wheelchair due to an accident 3 years ago, my husband and mother-in-law have become much colder towards me. One night, my husband said something I couldn't believe. "Sorry, but could you please leave this house for a moment?" "What? What do you mean?" I asked, shocked. "I mean exactly what I said. My mother and I talked it over and decided," he replied. "Are you saying you want a divorce?" I asked, trying to understand. "Yes, that's it. I've been thinking about it for a long time now. You can't earn any money, so I don't need you," he said harshly, as if he was squeezing blood from a stone. "I understand. Thanks for everything, and thanks for leaving me with nothing," I said, getting up. I left, knowing it would take them some time to realize the meaning of my words. My name is Linda Gray. After graduating from university, I have been working at my current company for 7 years. "Well then, I'll be heading out. Thanks for your hard work." "Thanks for your hard work too," a colleague replied as I closed my laptop and got up from my seat. I looked at the clock by the window and saw it was already 4 hours past my regular working time. An afternoon meeting had run late, and I had been preparing for a conference and responding to emails, which took longer than I expected. I left the office, got in the elevator, and went down to the first floor. As I walked through the automatic glass doors at the entrance, I saw that the sun had already set. I checked the train schedule on my phone as I left the company gate and headed to the nearest station. On my way, I saw 2 of my husband's colleagues walking in the same direction. I wondered if Jack, my husband, was already home. We had stopped talking about work at home recently, so I had no idea if he was busy. Talking about work at home had been making Jack cranky, so we naturally stopped discussing it. As I rode the train home, I stared out the window, lost in thought, watching the scenery go by. When I was dating Jack, we used to finish work at the same time so we could go home together. But for the past year or two, our schedules have been completely different. On the train, I noticed a young couple near the door, maybe college students, having a fun conversation about a movie they saw recently. Their happy scene reminded me of my own past, and I had to close my eyes tightly to stop the emotions from overwhelming me. "I'm home," I called out as I opened the front door, took off my shoes, and saw the neatly lined up shoes in the entrance. It seemed everyone else was already home. I heard the living room door open behind me and the sound of slippers coming closer. "Welcome home, Linda. You were late today," my mother-in-law, Jessica, said warmly. "I'm home, mother-in-law. I'll start preparing dinner right away," I replied. "Oh no, you don't have to rush. You're tired from working overtime, aren't you?" she said kindly. "Not really," I said cheerfully. "The afternoon meeting ran late, but things should settle down soon." I walked with Jessica to the living room. After getting married, it was just Jack and me. But last year, when his father got sick and was hospitalized, we moved into his parents' home and have been living as a family of 4 ever since. "Welcome back, Linda. You've had a tough day, haven't you?" My father-in-law, who was reading the newspaper on the living room sofa, greeted me warmly. "I'm back," I replied with a smile. Last year, he had a sudden brain hemorrhage and needed emergency surgery. While his condition was serious for a while, he is fully recovered after his rehabilitation. He is calm and friendly, and I liked talking to him since the first day we met. He used to be the head of the finance department before he retired, and he often gives me useful advice on managing the household budget. When I visited, we finished preparing dinner and gathered around the table as a family. Jessica mentioned that Kelly, who came over for lunch the other day, had a daughter named Jolie who had grown a lot. "Kids grow up faster when they're not yours," I responded. "Kelly is as beautiful as ever, and having a child really makes her look even more graceful," Jessica continued. "I guess so," I replied. "Kelly is Jessica's niece and Jack's cousin." Jessica often seems disappointed that Jack and I don't have children. She's not very happy that I continue to work after our marriage and often hints that she would like us to have a child whenever we meet. Honestly, I've always found it hard to deal with Jessica, especially since we started living together. She tends to bring up the topic of having children, especially on days when I come home late from work. "You could have had a child if you had started earlier, Linda. But I suppose it can't be helped because you're busy with work," she said. I nodded along, feeling uncomfortable. I glanced at Jack, who was quietly eating his meal without looking at me. Jack and I were colleagues at the same company and got married in our 3rd year of dating. We were told that it would be best if I became a housewife if we had a child, but we have both continued working since our marriage and haven't had any children. Both of us have wanted a child and tried everything from herbal medicine to medical tests, but nothing has worked. Despite a sense of loneliness, we decided to keep living as a couple and focus on our work. However, I started to feel a distance growing between Jack and me. We got married out of love and promised to make each other happy, but our relationship has gradually become cold. I think it started when Jack began having trouble at work. He didn't tell me anything, but I heard from a senior colleague in his department that Jack was struggling because he couldn't keep up with his peers. Jack is a gentle person who doesn't handle pressure well and tends to push himself too hard. I knew without him saying anything that he was feeling anxious and frustrated about the situation. But whenever I tried to offer him support, he would refuse to talk about his worries, insisting that he was fine and that I shouldn't worry. So he continued to keep his feelings to himself. I couldn't push him to open up, and I felt helpless that I couldn't be there for him. Even so, on our days off, we would make an effort to travel together or spend a relaxing day at home, enjoying our time together as a couple. When I felt drained from our unsuccessful attempts to have a baby, Jack was always there, quietly supporting me. That's why, even if I couldn't solve Jack's problems directly, I wanted to be by his side, providing comfort and peace. The turning point came when I got a promotion at work. I was recognized for my achievements on the projects I worked on and was one of the fastest among my peers to get promoted. "That's amazing, congratulations, Linda," Jack had said. I can't forget the look on his face when he congratulated me. I was so touched that I could only manage a simple thank you. As my work got busier, the distance between Jack and me seemed to grow. We spent less time together, our conversations became fewer, and when my income surpassed Jack's, we hardly even made eye contact anymore. I would watch Jack as he finished his meal in silence and then left the table without a word. I can't help but wonder if I hadn't been afraid of being pushed away and had tried harder to support him, would we have a different relationship now? When I opened my eyes, the first thing I saw was the bright white light of a fluorescent bulb. After blinking a few times, I looked around and realized I was lying in a hospital bed. I looked down and saw an IV in my arm, and both of my legs were wrapped in layers of bandages and casts. The moment I tried to move, an intense pain shot through my body. Tears welled up in my eyes from the sheer pain. My body felt as heavy as lead, and it seemed impossible to move. What on earth had happened? I tried to recall my memories leading up to that moment. I remembered going to work as usual, finishing a meeting and report, and leaving work on time for the first time in a while. After leaving the office, I was heading towards the station, which was busier than usual because of rush hour. Then I heard the screeching sound of sudden brakes from behind me. I turned around and felt a violent shock. I realized I'd been hit by a car. Fear and pain spread through my body. I worried about the condition of my body now. I heard footsteps approaching, and suddenly the curtain around my bed was opened. "Oh, Mrs. Gray, you're awake, but you shouldn't try to get up yet," said a young female nurse in a rushed tone. "I understand you're confused, but your doctor will explain everything shortly. Please stay calm for now." Okay," I replied, and the nurse left in a hurry. A few minutes later, the doctor arrived and explained what happened. Apparently, a truck driven by a sleepy driver crashed onto the sidewalk, and I was hit from behind. I had been rushed to the hospital immediately after the accident, and it had been about half a day since the surgery. "Excuse me, but have you contacted my family?" I asked. "Yes, we have informed your husband and his parents about the accident, and that the surgery went well. However, they seem to be out somewhere and can't come right away," the doctor said. "I see, thank you," I replied. Jack was away on a business trip, and his parents had been on an overseas vacation since last week. From the doctor's tone, I could imagine their reaction to the news. Even though they were out, it didn't sound like they responded as you would expect when being told a loved one has been in an accident. I laughed bitterly, thinking about Jack's reaction. It didn't seem like he would be worried about me. The doctor continued to explain that while there were no life-threatening injuries, the damage to both of my legs was severe. They said the chances of walking again were not good. As I listened, it felt surreal, like they were talking about someone else, not my own body. Jack visited the hospital 4 days after the accident. It was surprising to see his pained expression when he saw me, covered in injuries, lying in the hospital bed. "Sorry," he said, looking genuinely distressed. "I'm late." "It's fine, don't worry about it," I replied. "I'm sorry for interrupting your business trip." It had been a while since we last talked, and the atmosphere was awkward. Our conversation stalled, and we both avoided eye contact. Jack then excused himself to talk to the doctor, leaving the room. I couldn't bring myself to call out to him and just watched him leave. It's been 2.5 years since the accident. My legs are still disabled from the accident, and I've been confined to a wheelchair. Since the accident happened while I was leaving work, I managed to stay with the company for a while, but it became too hard to continue, so I resigned about 5 months ago. Since then, I've been spending my time at home, but a few things have been bothering me. One thing is Jessica's attitude towards me. It's gotten much harsher than before. Linda, do you have a moment? Yes, of course. I'm about to head out, but could you fold the laundry for me? It's just folding, so you can do it even if you can't move your legs, right? Yes, please be careful on your way out. Well then, please get it done. Ever since I started staying at home, I've been getting more and more snide comments from Jessica. She seems unhappy that her daughter-in-law is at home all day and not working. Now, every time we meet, her requests come with a side of sarcasm. I sigh as I folded the laundry. The other thing that's been on my mind is Jack's job. According to a former colleague, Jack seems to be struggling at work more than ever. He's being outperformed by younger colleagues and subordinates who joined after him. He seems to be viewed as a burden by those around him. He used to keep to himself after coming home from work, but lately he's been taking out his frustrations on me more often. Must be nice, Linda. You don't have to worry about work relationships anymore, and you get to eat without having to work. I heard from Mom that you've been lazing around all day doing nothing. I wish I could have that lifestyle just once. I no longer saw any trace of the kind Jack I once knew. His sarcastic remarks left me feeling sad for the man he had become. One night, he said, "I hate to ask this, but could you please leave this house?" I was at a loss for words, unable to understand the meaning of his abrupt statement. What? What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. My mom and I have talked it over and decided. I turned to look at Jessica, who was sitting next to Jack. Linda, ever since you quit your job, you haven't contributed to the living expenses or helped around the house. You've just been staying at home all the time. To be blunt, it's a nuisance for you to stay here any longer, she said. I don't. Don't you think it's rude to live off others without making any contribution to their household? Jessica continued, a triumphant look in her eyes. Jack remained silent, avoiding eye contact with me. Jack has a tough job too. Just because you're married, he doesn't have to support you anymore, she added. I looked at Jack, who was staring down. Jack is asking me to leave. Is this your way of saying you want a divorce? Yeah, that's it. I've been thinking about it for a long time, he replied. So after all this time, you have no feelings left for me. Why would there be? Of course not, Jack said, his words spilling out like a flood. Do you know how miserable I feel every time I see your face? You must have looked down on me, thinking you were better than me every day. It felt like the threads of our relationship were unraveling one by one. I tolerated you because you were contributing to the household expenses, but things have changed now. You're just someone who neither works nor has money, he said, clenching his fist, his words cutting like a knife. I don't need you now that you can't earn money. The last thread snapped. I understand, I said. For the first time, Jack looked at me. But I have a condition. All the divorce procedures will be handled through a lawyer. If you agree to that, I will pack my things and leave within the week. Sure, that's fine, right, Jack? Jessica said. Jack nodded silently. Well then, that's how it is, Jack, I said, jolting him out of his silence. Thank you for everything up until now, and thank you for leaving me with nothing, I said before walking out. A few days had passed since I left the house. When I checked my phone, I saw a call from Jack. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before picking up. Yes. Linda, I'm sorry. Could you please come back? He said. What's this all about all of a sudden? I asked, surprised by his change of heart. I heard from my dad that even after you quit your job, you've been covering our living expenses. You've been investing since you were working, haven't you? And now you're able to cover living expenses with the money you make from dividends, Jack said, his voice tinged with regret. Yes, that's right. So what? I responded, not sure where he was going with this. I left the household budget to you and my dad, so I didn't know anything about our finances. I thought we were living off my income, but now I realize we were mostly living off yours. I really regret saying such terrible things. I'm sorry, Jack continued, his tone softer, almost pleading. After we got married, we merged our finances, and I began investing my own money. My father-in-law encouraged me to invest, and he was the only one I talked to about financial management and investments. Jack never showed any interest in our finances, leaving it all to his dad and me. So, what am I supposed to do if I come back? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Well, my dad says that with my income alone, it's impossible to maintain the same standard of living we've had. Besides, I'm not confident that I can keep my current job for much longer. I'm struggling at work, and I don't know how much longer I can hold on, Jack admitted, his voice breaking. So what you're saying is you want me to come back so we can live comfortably? I asked, my anger rising. You really have some nerve. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear Jack breathing heavily, trying to find the right words. The reason I never said anything before is because, even though my feelings have changed, I believed that deep down, you still cared about me. But you're not the Jack I once loved anymore, I said, my voice trembling with emotion. That's not true, Jack said quickly, his voice full of desperation. I still care about you. I've just been going through a lot, and I've made mistakes. I know I've hurt you, but I want to make things right. Please come back. I sighed, feeling the weight of the years and the pain we had both endured. Jack, it's not that simple. You've hurt me deeply, and it's not just about the money. It's about how you've treated me, how you've taken me for granted. You've become someone I don't recognize anymore. I know, and I'm truly sorry. I've been a fool, and I've let my pride get in the way. I miss you, and I miss us. I want to make things right, but I need you to help me. Please, Linda, come back, Jack pleaded. I need time to think, I said, feeling the tears well up in my eyes. You can't just expect me to come back and pretend everything is okay. We need to talk about this, really talk, and figure out if we can find a way forward together. Okay, I understand, Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. Take all the time you need. Just know that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. As I hung up the phone, I felt a mix of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe Jack, to believe that he could change and that we could find a way to rebuild our life together. But another part of me was deeply hurt and uncertain if I could ever trust him again. I knew that whatever decision I made, it wouldn't be easy, and it would take a lot of time and effort to heal the wounds that had been inflicted over the years. I still love you, Linda, Jack said, his voice full of desperation. There's no need for you to say anything more, I replied firmly. All my feelings for you have vanished. The last time we talked, I made it clear that whatever happens to you and your family from now on, I just don't care. Thank you for leaving me with no trust, no memories, nothing at all, I continued, my voice cold and unyielding. Wait, Linda, please forgive me, Jack pleaded, his voice breaking. I'll handle all the divorce arrangements through my lawyer. Don't ever contact me again, I said, my tone final. I hung up the phone and immediately blocked his number, cutting off any further communication. After that, the divorce process moved quickly, and I made a clean break from Jack. The only person I still kept in touch with was my father-in-law. One day, my phone rang. It was my father-in-law. So have you had any trouble living alone since you split up with Jack? He asked kindly. No, not particularly, I replied, feeling a bit relieved to talk to someone who genuinely cared about my well-being. That's good to hear. I'm sorry for the trouble we caused you, Linda. When I heard what happened from Jack and my wife, I was so angry that I couldn't help but shout. I shouldn't have ignored the terrible way my wife and son treated you for so long. I'm truly sorry that I didn't do more to help, he said, his voice filled with regret. It's okay, sir. "Please don't worry about it," I replied, trying to ease his guilt. Actually, I caused some trouble too. After I left, things didn't go well at the house. Even without my income, Jack and Jessica kept living extravagantly without cutting back on their lifestyle. They ended up pawning their belongings and even went into debt. My father-in-law, frustrated with their irresponsible behavior, recently divorced his wife. "I see this as a good chance to rethink my life," I continued. "I can live just fine with my current lifestyle, and I want to take on new challenges. I feel optimistic about the future, even though things have been tough." "That's the spirit," my father-in-law said, a hint of pride in his voice. "You've always been strong, Linda. I have no doubt that you'll come out of this even stronger." After hanging up, I reflected on how much my life had changed. I had always been the one to keep our household running smoothly, managing our finances and making sure everything was in order. After we got married and combined our finances, I began investing my own money with the encouragement and guidance of my father-in-law. Jack had never taken an interest in our finances, leaving everything to his father and me. Since the divorce, I've had to make some adjustments, but overall, I've managed well. I've learned to live within my means, cutting back on unnecessary expenses and focusing on what truly matters. I've also started taking on new challenges, exploring new hobbies, and reconnecting with old friends. It hasn't been easy, but I found a sense of independence and self-reliance that I hadn't realized I was missing. Reflecting on my relationship with Jack, I couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and relief. We had once been so in love, but over time, our relationship had deteriorated. The pressure from his job, the expectations from his family, and our struggles to have a child had all taken their toll. Jack had changed, becoming someone I no longer recognized. His coldness and lack of support had driven a wedge between us, and no matter how much I tried to reach out to him, he had pushed me away. When I finally made the decision to leave, it was the hardest thing I had ever done. But now, looking back, I realize it was also the best decision for both of us. Jack needed to face his own issues, and I needed to find my own path. The divorce proceedings were straightforward, thanks to the help of my lawyer and the support of my father-in-law. He had always been kind to me, treating me with respect and offering his wisdom and advice on financial matters. Even after the divorce, he remained a source of support, checking in on me regularly and offering his assistance whenever I needed it. I learned that after I left, the household fell into chaos. Without my financial support and management, Jack and Jessica continued to spend recklessly, refusing to cut back on their lavish lifestyle. They eventually had to pawn their belongings and even went into debt. My father-in-law, frustrated with their irresponsibility and fed up with the constant stress, decided to divorce Jessica. Now, I see this as a chance to reassess my life and set new goals. I've been focusing on my own happiness and well-being, taking things one day at a time. I found new strength within myself and a renewed sense of purpose. I've also started to explore new opportunities, whether it's a new hobby or a potential career change. Life may not have turned out the way I expected, but I'm determined to make the most of it. As I laughed cheerfully with my father-in-law over the phone, I felt a sense of relief and hope. The future is uncertain, but I'm ready to face it with a positive attitude and an open heart. I'm grateful for the lessons I've learned and the support I've received, and I'm excited to see where this new chapter of my life will take me. Right after I bought a house with a garden, my husband Justin and his mom, Linda, both grinning, told me my in-laws would be moving in with us. They said if I didn't like it, Justin would divorce me. If Linda came, her mean daughter would surely follow. They knew I hated this, but did it anyway. The daily harassment would continue even in the new house. I shuddered at the thought and said, "No, I don't want to live with you." Linda looked at me, raising her eyebrows. she pulled out divorce papers, already signed by Justin. She only cared about getting the house. Their plan had worked, which was terrifying. I struggled to hold back my laughter. Seeing me tremble with my head down, Linda looked victorious. I quietly signed the divorce papers, packed my things, and left the house I dreaded. On moving day, my ex-mother-in-law bombarded me with calls. "Have you realized yet?" she demanded, asking to meet and talk. That was exactly what I wanted. I would meet her and end this myself. I prepared for the final confrontation and headed to face them. My name is Julie. I work at an advertising agency. My husband Larry was introduced to me by Eric, a manager at a newspaper company. I couldn't refuse Eric's offer because I was in a weak position. I was 31 at the time, and after 5 months of dating, I married Larry due to his persistence. I ended up regretting this decision at such an important moment. I think my ex-mother-in-law, Olivia, planned to deceive me from the start. She seemed gentle and kind, but her attitude changed as soon as I married Larry. She dropped the mask of a reasonable older woman and showed her true colors as a cruel mother-in-law. "Hey Julie, what are you doing? I told you to weed the garden after cleaning the dishes." Not a day passed without her shrill voice echoing through the house. I felt exhausted every day. I could barely manage a sigh in response. After the wedding, I agreed to live with my in-laws because Larry insisted. His father had passed away, and Olivia, his mom, had been dealing with a leg injury for years. Larry begged me, saying he couldn't leave his aging mother alone in the old house. But when I got there, I saw Olivia walking around just fine. She said that teaching a daughter-in-law was a mother-in-law's duty and treated me harshly every day. Larry was no help either. Whenever I suggested living separately, he made excuses and avoided the issue. He always did whatever she wanted and never stood up for me when she scolded me. "Yeah, my mom has quite a temper, huh?" he would say. "Stop grinning and help me. This is really hard for me." After getting married, I began to feel intense anxiety and depression. I found myself crying unexpectedly or feeling sick for no reason. After seeing a doctor, I was diagnosed with an adjustment disorder. The thought that every day spent at my in-laws was affecting me badly was truly unpleasant. Despite my feelings, Olivia continued to make unreasonable demands. "Don't be lazy just because it's your day off. Have you finished cleaning the room? You haven't gone shopping yet, have you? Make sure to check the discount stores before you go. Please, Olivia, don't shout at me. I have a headache. I'll do the cleaning and shopping later," I pleaded. "Don't give me that. When you're told to do something, you do it immediately. You're the daughter-in-law, aren't you?" "A daughter-in-law is not a maid," I wanted to retort. Her demands often involved the house itself, cleaning the gutters, replacing the wallpaper, fixing the splinters in the pillars. The in-laws' house was very old and falling apart. It creaked whenever the wind blew. Each time, she would urge Larry to get a new house. "This place is a rental, you know. We're renting it cheaply from an acquaintance. Just once, I want to live freely in our own home. Don't you think so, Larry?" "I do, but we can't afford it on my salary. A house of our own is just a dream," Larry replied. Olivia grew frustrated with her useless son and took out her frustration on me. "Cook, clean, weed the garden, take me to the hospital." She didn't care that I was exhausted from working full-time. It was no wonder I developed an adjustment disorder. I couldn't help but think that every day. 5 months after moving in with my in-laws, a woman who made my miserable life even worse arrived. Larry's sister Kelly came back after her divorce, bringing her child with her. She said her ex kicked her out, saying he didn't want to see her face anymore. "Well, it's my fault really," she admitted. "I left my kid alone and slept with my husband's boss. What kind of morals does this woman have?" When Kelly saw my shocked face, she smiled a little. Kelly, who looked just like Olivia, acted just like her too. She refused to do any housework and made me clean her room as well. "It's only fair, right? I'm raising a child." You wouldn't understand since you haven't given birth, but it's harder than it looks. So thanks in advance for your help, Julie." Kelly didn't work. She lazed around all day. Her care for her child was half-hearted at best. She would lie on the sofa doing nothing. On weekends, her behavior was especially bad. She'd leave her young daughter with me and go to the arcade. Kelly had some bad friends from her wild days, and sometimes started drinking with them in the afternoon. I wished she would at least help with some of the housework, but Kelly did absolutely nothing. She was the type of woman who would do anything to get money for fun. One day, Kelly handed me a drawstring bag. When I looked inside, I saw my dad's cufflinks, a ring, and some vintage lighters. "What do you expect me to do with these?" I asked. "Figure it out. Sell them and make sure you get a good price, okay?" Kelly said casually. These were my late father's belongings, meant to be keepsakes, yet Kelly told me to sell them without a second thought. I felt a wave of sadness, especially since she would likely use the money for the arcade. Unable to bring myself to do it, I explained the situation and handed the bag over to Larry. I don't know what he did with his father's keepsakes, and frankly, I don't want to know. When Kelly first returned, many things happened. My belongings frequently went missing after she arrived. Around that time, I also discovered that Larry was probably having an affair. A friend who worked at a different advertising agency saw him in town on a weekend. Larry was walking arm in arm with a flashy young woman. I was furious when I heard the story. I'm working hard from morning till night, even on weekends, and you're out having fun with a young woman. Unbelievable. This is cheating, right? Who is she? Tell me the truth. It's not cheating. She's just a worker from a massage parlor, Larry replied. And how is that any better? You shouldn't be going to such places when you're married, I shouted. Kelly laughed hysterically at our argument. Olivia seemed annoyed, but didn't strongly scold Larry. According to Olivia's logic, if a husband goes to such places, it's because the wife isn't devoted enough. Getting upset over something like that is embarrassing. The problem is you. If you were more devoted to Larry, this wouldn't happen, Olivia said. I don't agree, Olivia. Isn't that a bit unreasonable? I said. This is the norm in this house. Besides, going to places like that or having an affair shows a man's strength. A wife should forgive such things with a big heart, you know. What was normal for them was crazy to me. Forgive visits to those places and affairs? There was no way I could do that. My frustration only grew, and I couldn't just stand by any longer. Determined to change this unpleasant situation, I decided to take action. Olivia and Kelly stayed the same day after day, treating me like a servant. They lounged around on the sofa or floor, raising their voices when they were hungry. Hey, why isn't lunch ready yet? It's already noon. Stop dragging your feet, Julie. You're so slow, it's annoying. Then why don't you make it yourselves? I've been cleaning the garden, airing out the carpets, and shopping with no time to rest, I replied. Don't talk back. Know your place as the daughter-in-law, they snapped. I wasn't even allowed to voice my opinion. I was utterly fed up. I wanted a divorce immediately, but if it were that easy, I wouldn't have been struggling. Larry was introduced to me by Eric, a manager at a newspaper company. I owed a lot to my boss, Richard, who also asked me not to do anything that would embarrass him. Olivia knew this and often used it against me. I was completely stuck between a rock and a hard place. For a while, all I could do was endure. Then, one day, Larry's affair became undeniable. That friend from the other agency got solid proof. The first stage of my plan was complete. I needed to figure out my next move. About a month later, I think it was, Kelly spread out a housing catalog on the dinner table after dinner. From every angle, it was clear that these were items I had put in my bag. Look at this. Julie was planning to buy a house. Wait, did you rummage through my bag? Why? Why would you do that? I demanded. Just be quiet. Oh, it's a nice house, a bit in the countryside, but still. Hey Julie, you should have discussed something like this with me, Kelly said. I had my eye on a house with a garden. As Olivia said, it was in the countryside but looked quite good. I had already visited the place several times and met with the real estate agent. When I admitted this, the three of them became very interested. What? How far along are you in the process? Are you going to buy it? It's cheap and spacious. Not bad at all, Olivia said. Larry added, "Amen, got to be bold. Oh, well, a house with a garden, huh? That's a big decision if you decide to become the head of your own household. I'll support you, and I'll even help a little financially. Wouldn't you like to leave here and live with Julie in your own place?" Olivia said, pretending to be supportive. She was already encouraging Larry before I could say anything. How fake. She had no intention of letting me go easily. When I asked whose name the house would be under, Larry frowned. "I'm the head of the household. It will be in my name, of course." "Then can I go ahead with the purchase? We'll buy this house, and the two of us will move out, right?" I asked. "All right, I've decided. I'll buy the house. Go ahead and move forward with the arrangements," Larry finally said firmly. Olivia and Kelly both praised Larry for his decision, but I noticed them exchanging a knowing smile. A few days later, just after buying the house with a garden in the countryside as planned, Larry and Olivia, both grinning, made an announcement. "They're moving in too," Larry said. "What? But you said we live there alone," I exclaimed. "After thinking it over, we decided to live together. You're not going to say no, are you? If you refuse, I'll make Larry divorce you." "I wonder what your boss Richard would think of that," Olivia said. There it was, a cowardly move. If Olivia came, Kelly would surely follow. I shuddered at the thought of daily harassment continuing even in the new house. "No way, I absolutely refuse. I have no intention of living there with you," I said firmly. "You don't seem to understand your position," Olivia said, her eyebrows shooting up in anger, her face red, veins bulging at her temples. She pulled out divorce papers from somewhere, and Larry's part was already signed. Her face showed she didn't care about anything as long as she got the house. "If you're really going to refuse, then sign here," she said. "All right, I will. I'll sign. Let's get divorced. I've had enough," I replied. "What? Hey, Julie, are you sure about this?" Larry asked. "Leave her. A useless woman like this is just going to make you angry. You're young. You'll find a new wife soon enough," Olivia said harshly. I quietly signed the divorce papers. Olivia looked triumphant, but she had no idea how I felt. My plan had worked perfectly, which was terrifying. I struggled to hold back my laughter. A few days after I moved into my new apartment, I started getting a lot of calls from Olivia. Checking my calendar, I realized today was their moving day. She must have figured it out. The phone kept ringing nonstop, typical Olivia. Ignoring the calls didn't help, they kept coming. Finally, I answered due to her persistence. Olivia didn't even say hello, she just started yelling. "Julie, how could you do this? What kind of house did you make us buy?" "Hello, Olivia. Calm down. What are you talking about? I don't understand," I replied. "Don't play dumb. This house, you knew it was defective when you bought it, didn't you? Didn't you?" she screamed. "That's right. The house I chose had problems. The ground was unstable, causing the land to sink. Even a new house could have doors and windows that wouldn't close properly after a few years. There were old mining tunnels nearby that caused these issues. The locals knew about this and built their houses on stable land. Only clueless newcomers fell into this trap. I used this problem-ridden house to trick those three. It was tough to find a reasonably priced defective house, even with the help of a real estate agent. I'd also made sure Kelly would steal the real estate catalog from my bag. I had deliberately left my bag in an easy-to-steal place. They fell right into the trap and moved in. It was hard to keep from laughing when I signed the divorce papers. I wanted to tell them everything, but I couldn't. I played dumb. A defective house? That can't be right. There must be some mistake, I said, feigning innocence. "What is with that attitude? So fake. Just come over here, Olivia demanded. No, honestly, I don't ever want to see you again, I replied firmly. What? What did you say? She yelled. There was no way I wanted to see that unreasonable family again. I told her I wouldn't meet them even if they paid me. Then Larry took over after she clicked her tongue. Julie, please think about our situation a little, Larry said. I could say the same to you, Larry. Did you ever think about my feelings? No, you didn't. I was always isolated, I retorted. I'm sorry. I'll apologize. Just tell me where you moved to, he pleaded. Why would I tell you that? If you showed up, I'd have to move again. I want to cut all ties with you, I said. The conversation went nowhere. Eventually, Olivia and the others started making even more outrageous claims. They said the divorce was invalid and that we were still family. I had 2 colleagues sign as witnesses and submitted the divorce papers to the city hall. They are valid, and there's no way it's invalid. How unreasonable can they be? Anyway, they kept insisting, just meet with us once, Julie. We need to settle this properly. Olivia and Larry were determined to meet and talk. I knew they would keep calling if I kept refusing. I had no choice but to meet them to put an end to it myself. Fine, I'll meet with you once, I said. Thank you, I owe you one, Larry replied. But I'll choose the time and place, okay? I couldn't risk being ambushed or followed. I needed to stay in control to ensure my safety. After making careful plans, I arranged to meet the 3 of them at a cafe. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes late. Olivia and Kelly were already furious from waiting. Larry had a strained smile on his face. As expected, they were predictable. How dare you keep your elders waiting? It's so disrespectful, Olivia shouted. I don't want to hear about respect from you. So what do you want? I replied. What's with that attitude? It's infuriating. We're stuck with a defective house because of you. Take responsibility, Kelly chimed in. I told you, I don't know anything about that. You decided to move in on your own, didn't you? I responded. Olivia faltered, unable to deny that she and Kelly had willingly moved into the defective house. Their previous home was being renovated, so the only place they had to live was the defective house. If you're done, I have something to say. Olivia, I will be suing you for damages. Prepare yourself, I said. What? Damages? Suing? Why? What did I ever do to you? Tell me clearly, Olivia demanded. You mentally tormented me to the point of developing an adjustment disorder, I said, showing them a copy of my medical diagnosis. The 3 of them stared at it intently. Olivia's eyes widened. She probably never imagined I had been seeing a psychiatrist. You never thought about how much your words hurt others, did you? It was very painful for me. I felt nauseous and cried a lot. It was really tough, I continued. That's because you're weak. You were a lousy daughter-in-law and deserved it. Isn't that right? Olivia retorted. Calling me a lousy daughter-in-law repeatedly is slander. Slander is punishable by up to a year in prison or a fine of up to $5,000, I said firmly. What? That's ridiculous, Olivia exclaimed. What's ridiculous? I countered. Olivia didn't understand the seriousness of her actions. She had no idea how harmful her behavior was or how much her verbal abuse had hurt me. You also did other things that are punishable by law. You threatened me multiple times, saying you'd tell Richard about the divorce. That's extortion, I added. Wait, isn't that a bit exaggerated? Larry interjected. It's not exaggerated at all. By the way, extortion carries a penalty of up to 3 years in prison or a fine of up to $5,000, I replied. I won't back down on this, I said firmly. All right, wait a minute. Kelly stepped in, her eyes sharper than usual. She had the look of someone who wouldn't be intimidated by threats. What is this? Scaring my mom by taking advantage of her ignorance? Do you have any proof of these so-called slanders and threats? Yes, I do. I've been recording everything, I replied. What? Recording? Kelly's eyes widened. Yes, I had been recording with my phone's voice memo the entire time I lived at my ex-in-law's house. I have plenty of audio recordings, including data of Olivia's abusive language. Submitting this as evidence would confirm the charges of slander and threats. Did you really think I'd just take it? It's not just Olivia. Kelly, you're also guilty. You'll be held accountable too. What? Why me? What did I do? Kelly's voice rose in panic. Think about it. Haven't you committed any crimes, or are you saying you haven't caused me any trouble? Of course not. Don't be ridiculous. Kelly insisted she was innocent. I showed her the screen on my phone. Kelly's face turned pale. It showed her rummaging through my bag, nervously glancing around while searching the contents. What's that? How did you record this? Because my belongings frequently went missing after you arrived. Makeup, accessories, clothes, bags. I set up a hidden camera. This is awful. How could you do that? You're just a daughter-in-law. Unbelievable. Who's the one overstepping boundary here? Let me inform you about the penalty for theft: up to 12 years in prison or a fine of up to $5,000. I'll be contacting the police, I said firmly. Kelly's mouth opened and closed. She wanted to argue, but she couldn't. She looked completely helpless. I had kept track of all my missing items. Knowing the exact extent of the damages would make it easier for the police and lawyers to act. If I was going to do this, I would do it thoroughly. I was determined not to let these three off the hook. Finally, it was Larry's turn. He shrank back under my glare. If there was anyone I couldn't forgive the most, it was him. I believed a marriage was about mutual support, but Larry, you saw things differently, didn't you? From start to finish, you were always my enemy, weren't you? Enemy? No, I never meant that. Not at all. Please believe me. Even today, I was trying to mediate as much as possible, Larry pleaded. Sure, enough with the lies. I don't need your mediation, I said coldly. Larry was a cowardly man. He always sided with the stronger party. He had always been with Olivia and Kelly. Even now, he was trying to placate me to save himself. If he had been a slightly better man, maybe, but it was too late now. I would have stayed married if he had just said, "Let's move away and live just the two of us." I might have done that. The name of your affair partner? I believe it's Nicole. What? How did you know? Larry stammered. I had a friend investigate. She's good at that. I even have pictures of you and Nicole entering a hotel together. Look, here they are, I said, showing the photos. No, don't show them. Don't show them. Larry tried to stop me from showing the screen. He didn't want his mother and sister to see his affair. But why should it matter? Their morals were already broken. They were all like-minded. I put my phone and the copy of the diagnosis back in my bag. I had shown all the evidence I needed. Olivia, Larry, and Kelly looked defeated and drained of energy. If they did anything wrong, they'd be reported to the police. They seemed scared, but I was fully intending to consult the police regardless of their actions. I believe the police will come by eventually. Don't try to run. It will only make things worse. And make sure you don't follow me. Understood, I warned. Julie, don't be so cold. We were married until recently, remember? Larry pleaded. Yes, and honestly, I think marrying you was a huge mistake. I feel so relieved we're not a couple anymore. If you follow me, I'll press charges. So don't wait outside my office or contact me unless it's absolutely necessary, I said firmly. I made a few simple agreements with the three of them and left the cafe. Even after I left, they sat there looking dejected. You can't stop people from talking. The news of Larry's divorce quickly spread at his company. The reasons his infidelity and mistreatment of me spread along with it. As a result, Larry faced cold treatment at work. The person who introduced us was Eric from the affiliated newspaper company. Naturally, Larry lost his trust and was viewed harshly. Unable to endure the hostile environment, Larry eventually quit. He struggled to find new employment, and his relationships with his mother and sister became strained. About a year after our divorce, Larry reappeared in front of me. He called out to me as I was leaving work, and I turned to see a shabby-looking man standing there. "Larry, I barely recognized you," I said. "I know people say my face has changed lately," Larry said. He looked like he had been through a lot. Olivia and Kelly were convicted and fined, and I had claimed alimony from Larry. They must be struggling financially now. They still had to pay off the mortgage on the defective house, so things were tough. "How are Olivia and Kelly?" I asked. "They're alive, just barely hanging on. They're both working now because they have to, or we wouldn't survive. They always say they want to go back to the old life, relying on my and your income. They haven't changed a bit. They're like parasites," Larry said. Cutting ties with them was definitely the right decision. I thought he might argue, but he didn't. Larry sighed deeply and apologized to me. "I'm really sorry for everything. I deeply regret it. I was a fool. You were right. I should have always been on your side. I must have been out of my mind." "Your whole family has been out of their minds from the start," I replied coldly. "Please, let's live together again. I'll cut ties with them for real this time." "You're the only one for me," he pleaded. "Oh really? Too bad. I'm seeing someone else now." "Even if I wasn't, I'd never take you back," I said firmly. When I said that, Larry collapsed to his knees, but his pitiful act didn't work on me anymore. If I were less well-mannered, I would have spat on him right then. I left him there and went home. He never contacted me again. The real estate agent who helped me told me that Olivia, Larry, and Kelly's lives had fallen apart. They blamed each other for their poverty, which worsened their relationships. Neighbors heard shouting and glass breaking from their house almost every night. They berated and tormented each other but couldn't break free. It was nothing short of hell. They were quite isolated in the community, with no one wanting to interact with them. Eventually, they will likely sell their unsellable house for next to nothing and end up homeless with just their debts. I can clearly imagine the three of them huddled together, cursing each other under the cold sky. One day, I'd like to see their miserable state when they've hit rock bottom. Meanwhile, I'm living a happy life that feels almost unreal. It's all thanks to my new partner, the one I mentioned to Larry. He's a successful salesperson at a big trading company, a mature man with a gentle nature who respects others. He's also divorced, like me. We're planning a small wedding soon. My first marriage was a really bitter experience. Even now, I sometimes tear up when I remember the hardships. But even during those times, I feel warmth and comfort when I lean on him. This is where I belong. I took a long detour, but I finally arrived. That's how I feel. Because of the struggles I've been through, I can now be kinder to others. I want to use my experiences to live a positive and bright life. That's how I feel these days.